was basically submitted to NTIA prior to that version 4 map coming out, which I think is probably the mismatch that you are seeing. So a lot of new service was reported in the map that came out in mid to late May. And we are still waiting for guidance from NTIA on how to incorporate that newly reported service. Because this is going to happen again in November and again next May. So by the time we submit our final proposal to NTIA for BEAD, indicating who our subgrantee recipients are, we're going to have 3 new versions of the map. So we're still waiting for guidance from NTIA on how that'll be updated or how we're allowed to update that essentially. And I've been pushing on our contact there to get that information sooner rather than later, and we'll definitely keep you all updated. But yeah, I would say if it's reported as having reliable service in the FCC map, that's the best pathway for us to get it updated in our map. So we're past the point of, the challenge process where people could say, no, I think your data is wrong. Now it's a matter of we can only pull from certain sources now, and that is the FCC BDC map. So
Yeah, and I apologize, Megan. I tried to get a login through the NTIA so that I could go through the challenge process. And I got stuck on one FCC ID number that I could not find. And so I never did get myself set up in the NTIA portal to be able to challenge. So anyway, yeah, it is what it is, but water under the bridge now.
yeah, and we'll keep you all updated on how that process is going to look.
Yeah.
Sorry, Megan, can I ask a follow-up on that point? Because
yeah,
I haven't heard of that before. I thought that the PAMs, I know that they're in draft status right now, but I thought that at least the locations were finalized. And as a lot of people I'm sure on this call went through a lot of effort during the challenge process to get all of that done. And now I'm sure a lot of us are also spending resources, planning, including like engineering resources to go after some of the locations that are showing as eligible now. Has the NTIA provided any guidance at all as to if someone goes and let's say lays fiber or another reliable solution, if it's cable, whatever it is, if those are going to be eligible or not? Do you feel that those dots are going to come off the map?
There's no guidance yet. The only thing we know for sure is if an enforceable commitment is announced. So like, let's say USDA announces a reconnect grant. That is for sure coming off the map. When that comes off the map, I'm not sure yet. And then, our goal as a state is to use our money efficiently and not overbuild. So if fiber is being built in an area, we're probably going to eventually, see that and work to take it off the map. So it's sort of a matter of timing and following the NTIA rules. But, if you're aware of something being built, I would advise taking a closer look at the area before applying.
Got it. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Looks like Scott has his hand raised.
Hey, Megan. I saw the announcement for the release of the maps recently, and I'm thinking I'm not the only one, but I don't really know what I'm looking at when I look at that new map, and I was just kind of curious if you guys could just provide a brief overview of what it represents and how to interpret it.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially the project area map is in order to apply for BEAD, we basically need to find a way to subdivide the state into what are called project areas. So um, the state makes that subdivision, and then an applicant can apply for one or more of those project areas at a time. So we proposed in our volume 2, and that was approved by NTIA, that our building block would be a census block, and that a project area would be no larger than a census block group. So every project area is going to be something in between a census block and a census block group. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're not creating groups of census blocks that are, disadvantageous to, the community or the viability of building a network or anything like that.
And so you're saying when we're looking at these blocks on the map, it's either an actual individual census block or it's a conglomeration of multiple census blocks.
Yes.
And somehow you did that strategically to try to be, I guess, smart as it relates to what might make sense for somebody to build out an area.
Yes.
And what's the when I'm looking at the gray and the pink, reddish pink, what's the difference there?
Those are regrouped and not regrouped project areas. So those regrouped ones are going to have a list of which census block groups are in there.
So which is which?
Pink is the grouped, and then the blue grayish color is not. Yeah.
The blue grayish is just an actual census block?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another hand raised from William.
There, thanks. I was kind of going off of the last question you had, but could you give an example of the grouping of census blocks up to the group or up to the census block group? I think the wording for me is a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so yeah, and we kind of use the same terminology for different things on accident a lot of the time. But a census block group is it's a level of census geography, essentially. So, when you're looking at census geographies, your base is the block, and then those get grouped into a census block group, and those get grouped into a tract, which gets grouped into a county and state. So, a census block group is a predefined unit based on census block IDs. And I don't off the top of my head know like what the average number of blocks in a group is.
Yeah.
But it could be anything from like 3 to like 1,000.
Right. And I guess as I look at try to define like the project area, if a project area could either be a census block or a census block group, like how am I allowed to group the individual census blocks up to a grouping and have that be a project area? Like, that's acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think that clarifies my question. And I guess while I have the floor, do we know when the NTIA is going to announce the approved passings for BEAD?
We don't. We submitted our data in May, and we're still waiting for approval on that. I keep saying any day now, but then many days pass. But
Sure.
I think we should have it relatively soon. Based on the stage we are in the process, I don't foresee major changes to what we have showing on the map right now, but there's always a chance that there's something, something they don't approve of in our results. So it's not final till it's final.
Sure. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Scott, your hand is still up, but I think that's from before. So I'm going to jump to David. Go.
Hey, Megan, I'm gonna keep going on the map questions here. So the other layer in the map is the the location points. And I'm not seeing in the legend kind of how those are classified by color. And then I guess the second part of my question is the data in this map exportable in any way?
Yeah, so the project areas, the polygons, and this, I think, census blocks are exportable due to the license agreement with CostQuest. We can't make the points publicly available. I think we do have a do we have a CSV of the location IDs? So if you have your CostQuest license, you can download those.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, unfortunately, we can't share the point file because of that license agreement, but we have tried to make that data available for folks who do have a license while still displaying it for, some visual verification.
Okay, so does that CSV then include the eligibility data that we can kind of join to the licensed point data?
Yes. Yeah, and the eligibility classification is basically, I hope I have that written down in the metadata for the CSV, but it's 0 equals unserved, 1 equals underserved, and 2 equals served. And served also includes all funded locations as well.
Yep, that is in the summary of the data, and I have that link posted in the chat there.
Oh, great.
Perfect. Thank you both.
Okay, and I know there have been a ton of chats. Has anyone on my team been monitoring that and can let me know what the next question is?
For sure. Sorry, I'm just trying to sum this up. The methodology for the project area map is listed on the site, Kate. I think that's going to answer your question best on how we try to cluster everything together. And some of it was based on geographic boundaries, try not to put things over like a mountain pass if possible, across rivers, lakes, etc. But we did have to base it all on the census blocks.
I think you're probably talking about my first question.
Yep. Yeah.
So my question is actually more on one of the roundtable calls last week. I think maybe it was Megan or Brandy mentioned wanting to hear public comment about how the market and prospective applicants would like to see the individual census blocks as they appear now actually grouped or clustered for the final project area map, right? And I guess I just wanted to hear more about like why you want to get those clustered before the window opens, and like instead of giving applicants, I guess, more flexibility, particularly if they're deciding between having a 100% fiber application and a second like hybrid application within like one service area of that applicant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, what we're looking for is like, if you've looked at the map and the data, you'll know there's about 20,000 project areas right now. Some of them have, 4 eligible locations or like a small number like that. So what we're trying to do is, if there are a lot of project areas that are in one town or something, like, does it make sense to just group those together now and keep them as one project area? And that way, the less project areas there are, the easier it will be for the CBO to review those applications, compare those applications, and make sure that we're getting that we're using the funding efficiently. So, if we're piecemealing really small project areas together versus saying, okay, this whole town deserves to be one project area, that makes sense to everyone. Let's make this simpler. So it's really
Thank you.
about keeping it simple.
Great. And I think I can just jump in. I had another question in there, which is related to the first question where you said, like, you're still waiting for guidance from NTIA about how to make updates to the map based on the updated FCC fabric. And I know you said, like, well, if something goes from unserved to underserved, you've asked for guidance about that. And I was just wondering if you're also looking at it the other way. So if there has been a challenge since you pulled the version of the fabric that you're using for the PAMs, are you also going to update it potentially to switch something that shows that it's served to unserved or underserved if that update happens to the FCC map? Like, are you asking for guidance on that? And relatedly, if there's a location that says that it exists right now as unserved or underserved, but that's challenged as like not a real location, like maybe it's an empty field or a barn, are you also asking for guidance for how to remove those? And I basically just ask that because it also is really time consuming sometimes to make those challenges, but obviously it's worth it if at some point that's going to be integrated in.
Right. So my understanding from my conversations with NTIA is that we cannot move a location from served to underserved or unserved at this point. So anything that's already marked served or marked with an eligible or with an enforceable commitment is just not going to be eligible for BEAD no matter what. So if the company defaults on, hundreds of RDOF locations, we can't add those back in. So, and yeah, same if there's like a FCC challenge and a location is shown to be unserved now, we can't add that back in. So it's really just a one way, like we can take eligible locations off the map, but we can't add them to the map. And as far as issues with actual location challenges, still waiting on guidance on that. I'm not really sure how those will be dealt with.
Ground transportation and baggage claim in front of your customer service.
Okay, thank you so much, Megan.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Okay.
just to add to that, to validate that, like I personally spent quite a bit of time going over like the most rural locations in the entire state, checking if they were like if they had power poles, if I could check that, or if it just clearly that it was rocks. And I understand the level of effort that goes into that. It's an undertaking. So we appreciate the fact that y'all are even getting into it, Kate.
All right. Looks like a lot of the questions in the chat have been answered. Maisie asked, does the state have a target for consolidating project areas? We don't have a set target. We were thinking of potentially having a minimum number of eligible locations, but that could also get a little sticky if there's like really large census blocks that only have a couple locations. We don't want to unnecessarily group those just to meet a minimum. So yeah, it's not an actual target. It's just, 20,000 is a lot. So we're just hoping to reduce that
And
in general.
based on what we have in volume 2, the minimum number that it can get to, I believe Megan, was around 2,000, correct? If census block group is the largest we can choose, 2,000 is the lowest number it can go.
Thank you for the additional detail. I really appreciate it. I guess here's my concern. Right now, we have 20,045 project areas, and the application window is very short. So any work that prospective applicants can do now is really important, but it's not really feasible to model projects if we're going to go from 20,000 project areas to 2,000 project areas. It's simply that's simply not possible. So I'm trying to get a sense of how much these project areas are going to be consolidated so that I can tell whether I'm, totally wasting my time and trying to model projects now instead of waiting until after the project map comes out, the final one. So, I mean, if we are talking about going down to 2,000, then there's no work that I can do right now. But if we're only talking about, a 25% reduction, then, I think myself and other prospective applicants would be, willing to take a gamble on, doing some preliminary modeling that, may or may not be valid after the final map comes out. So I really would appreciate some additional context for the scope and the scale of the consolidation that you guys are contemplating.
Yeah, and I would say pay attention to census block group boundaries. And if there are, if there's a census block group that you're looking at and you wouldn't be able to do a project if we combine the whole thing together, that's the kind of comment that would be really helpful to us when we're creating that final map, to know okay, for census block group 1, we know it's a bad idea to combine the whole thing. So we can put that into our model and make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, and just to confirm really quick, you're not able to split up census blocks. You're only able to combine them together. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the extra detail.
Yeah. Yeah, the block is the base unit, so there's no splitting that up.
They will also remain contiguous, Maisie, so we're not going to jump over different blocks, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There's a couple questions I'm seeing about methodology and logic. And we do have some basic explanation of the methodology on that project area map homepage. We were essentially looking at the CostQuest cost model and created an algorithm that tries to optimize the tries to group the census blocks in a way that optimizes the potential business case across the state. So that's kind of the basic one sentence explanation of the methodology. And, you know, keeping in mind that cost models are never fully correct, and we're just using this as a since it's the data we have, that's how we decided to create that algorithm. All right, someone asked, are addresses flagged as high cost or are certain areas flagged as high cost? So the designated high cost areas are defined by NTIA. We can find the link for that, put it in the chat. But essentially the NTIA determined which areas are designated high cost for the BEAD program. And we're just reflecting that in our data. And do we have a high cost flag in the data that's posted?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'll find that link and throw it in the chat. So you can see it's by census tract, I believe. So there are just a few tracts that are designated in Colorado. All right.
So Megan, there's a question that's come up a couple times. Josh Ingram reposted it. I don't know if you want to, it was all the way up at the top of the chat if you want to answer that one, but Josh just reposted it very recently. So
okay, so the question is, so fiber is getting built in an area that is currently eligible, and then someone is awarded funding for that area. Is that something the provider in the process of building the fiber will be able to submit proof of the fiber being built and have those funds withdrawn? So yeah, what we talked about earlier in the call was if fiber is already built and reported to the FCC, we're waiting on guidance from NTIA on how to reflect that on our locations and our process. But if fiber is currently being built, that's a question we might need to take back.
Megan, I'm noting some of those too, so I can.
Okay, thank you. And I know Ali Terry is on the call and might have some color to add to that from a compliance perspective, but I think that would be more of a programmatic question on, I don't think we have an appeals process, but there could be something in our process about how to deal with those kind of areas. But yeah, we'll take that back and answer it later offline. Let's see. Do awarded but not in progress RDOF count? We see some areas that appear to be available in TBO maps that we expected to be unavailable due to RDOF. Without knowing the specific areas, I think it could be that the technology listed in the RDOF grant was not considered a reliable technology according to BEAD. Or if they have defaulted, but yeah, we'd have to look into the specific situations. And to David's second question, if the fiber exists and is not submitted to FCC, that's basically asking if there's a challenge or appeals process, which we'll take back and send out a follow-up later. Okay, the high cost threshold. That will be determined later. We have not set the extremely high cost per location threshold yet. Okay. David's follow-up says the areas we looked at do not show default, but do show eligible. We can refine this data, but it sounds like you do not believe undefaulted RDOF addresses should be available for additional funding, correct?
David, if you want to send that, if you have a specific area in mind and you want to communicate with us where you think there was an error, we would be happy to look into that. As far as I know, even with the feds comparing the RDOF data to our eligible location list, they didn't see any incorrect locations. So yeah, I guess we would have to look into the exact area that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and my guess is that potentially there could be non-reliable technology involved in that RDOF grant. But that's the only reason it would not be on there if it's not defaulted.
Did they release like new RDOF stuff recently, Megan? I'm wondering if the dates might also be different, but I don't know when they release that stuff because again, we did submit things back in May and the deduplication process happened through June. So if there's new stuff out, it's possible that those would not correlate anymore.
True.
But that's a very unlikely situation. I don't think they've released new stuff in the past month, but
yeah. Yeah, if there are situations like that you have specific, very specific questions or data, feel free to email us. Colin just put our email address in the chat.
Megan, do you want to bring up the hub page or Lauren, so we can go through that real quick and show some navigation and how it works?
Sure.
Megan, I'm assuming you want to do it so you can walk through.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh. This one. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. And I assume this link has gone into the chat at some point in this meeting. So yeah, this is a page on our challenge portal. So if you have that bookmarked, you can always, if you're here, it's just this little tab at the top. So we have some overview information, information on the public comment window. If you're looking for the regular Advance-BEAD website to comment on grant guidelines or any of that, we have the link here. Data download, I'll click on this data search link. Oh. And basically you can view all the data related to the challenge process and the project area map. But if you click on data, you have like the CSV data set of the post-challenge locations. Disclaimer, pending approval. Please download the new one when we get approval. And the project areas are here if you want to download the those project areas to work on in your own system. I'll go back to the main page. That methodology description is here as well. It's sort of a basic explanation without trying to get too into the weeds. And then we have instructions for how to submit public comment on this, how to review the map, a few tips on what is actionable feedback and what cannot change and what can change. So like we've talked about in this meeting, the eligibility classification of locations cannot be changed through this process. But if you want to regroup census blocks or comment on our methodology or how we're grouping them, that's stuff that we can take action on in this process. Yeah, if you need a walkthrough of how to navigate the map, there's a little slide deck there. And then if you scroll all the way down, the map should load for you. If this isn't showing up, it could take a few minutes based on your internet connection. But you can basically click out of anywhere off of that instruction screen, and then the map will show up and you can zoom in and out, view certain areas. And yeah, did we answer the question on what the symbology for the points?
I think that was an issue of the fact that with the CostQuest license, the way it is, and us publishing a vector tile layer rather than a actual shapefile, I guess that we didn't publish a second shapefile with just the legend for the legend. But in this case, blue is served or funded, orange is underserved, and red is unserved.
Okay, and we'll update that on the map so you all have it for reference.
Absolutely, we'll just have to push a shapefile or something similar feature class with just the legend rather than the vector tile layer as we currently have it.
Great. Yeah, and to submit comments, you just need to fill in your info. No, it's not going to let me just go through that. Is that in the slides, Christy?
Yeah, it is in the slides. Yes, it's not. Those are all required fields.
So yeah, you can view attributes clicking on the map and then filling out the form. You'll select whether you're commenting on a specific project area within the map or if it's more of a general comment about methodology or about our approach. So,
Megan, there's a question in the chat about defining address classification. Can you define address classification is the question?
define address classification.
I think, William, and you feel free to hop on as well. You're talking about how that's defined by internet service, and it is 0 for unserved. That's the red points on there. 1 for underserved, the orange, and then 2 for served. And those speeds are going to be unserved will be below 25.3. Underserved will be 25.3 up to 120, and then served is over 120 by the NTIA definitions, if I'm remembering correctly.
And that's the same for the post-challenge address draft?
Yes. Yeah, and one other note about that is that's for reliable technologies as defined by the NTIA. So I think they include fiber, cable, and licensed fixed wireless. So if you see on the FCC map that it's, oh, this has 120 service, but it's satellite, that's, that's not part of the list of reliable technologies, and that's why it's not considered served.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, another question from Scott.
Yeah, I'm probably beating this one to death because you've tried to answer it a couple times, but Adam's comment on what the definition of the points were made me think. So I was trying to eyeball RDOF areas on this map as I understand them, and my original question was going to be something like, are you not including RDOF areas in your project areas, or are you somehow faking the point out and making it look served when it's not? Because my original mental definition was blue meant served, but he said it meant served or funded. And so I'm curious when I'm looking, and it might be your same answer about the technologies in the RDOF, but when I see these blue areas these blue points in an RDOF area, and I also see the project area drawn out, I'm like, so they're saying it's served / funded. So in that case, an RDOF area, something I'm pretty sure is unserved, is funded, but you've also got a project area drawn around it. The assumption from what I heard you say earlier is that shouldn't be that way unless the technology in the RDOF is, not up to BEAD standards.
Yeah.
I'll send you guys an email with the RDOF areas I'm looking at, because something just doesn't look right when I'm looking at this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I thought of while you were talking that I'd like to point out is you can add data here. So if you had a, if you had a file of the RDOF areas, you could upload it, into this map and you could look at that overlay. If there's probably RDOF data it in ArcGIS online, so you can also add it through, you know, if you can search, you know, you'd have to find which is a reliable layer to look at. But if you have that data somewhere, you can add it into this map. And then sort of to your other question, a project area, so these like blank areas that don't have pink or gray, are basically areas with no eligible locations. So when you see a project area drawn, it means there is an eligible location in it. So like if we look at this one, it looks pretty empty, but if you zoom in, there's these 2 locations right on the edge. So everyone that's drawn should have at least one eligible location within it. But yeah, happy to take a look at whatever you want to send our way.
Okay, thanks, you guys.
Yeah, another useful way to plan would be to drop in a project area. We wouldn't be able to see it or anything like that, but if you have a planned service area that you're trying to do or build out you're trying to look at, you could drop those boundaries in and see which census block groups they cross and see what points are going to be inside of there, generally speaking. So.
Yeah.
Which hopefully takes some burden off if it does get regrouped or simplified down, then you would still be able to select those points pretty quickly or those project areas relatively quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't even know what town I'm zoomed in on, but just as an example of potential groupings, it looks like this project area has, yeah, 1 unserved location in it. So, you know, logically, ideally, maybe we group it with a few of these ones around it so that, you know, one applicant isn't just like, all right, I'll go serve that 1 location and then, you know, some random stuff over here. We want to make sure this whole part of town gets served through this program.
Yeah. And the inverse of that too, where people aren't just leaving off that 1 location at the end and they grab everything else around there that's easier to serve.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Did I miss anything in the chat? Feel free to raise your hand or add more to the chat if I missed you.
Ben had a question specifically, so I'm going to address the second point there. Are the census block groups a layer on the map? If that's in terms of display, Christy responded in terms of display. If you're actually looking to dig into the underlying data to look at, if I click on a regrouped project area, Megan, if you don't mind like zooming out a little bit. If you click on one of the red project areas, we have some arcade built into this map that kind of lists off the census blocks. But if you go through and download this data as well, I believe the relationships should be existing. So if you use GIS to pull that in, there should be a relate there where you can you know, select a census block group and it would pop out which the contained census blocks are within it. As far as the first question, can you submit a comment for an outline or group of census blocks?
Yeah, the short answer on that one, Ben, would be yes, that is the purpose of this. So if you do have a suggestion or a comment or concern about a grouping of them, you can come on and you can select them. And as Adam said, if they're regrouped, you will want to make sure you're selecting the proper census block groups that are in there to be like, yeah, like this one doesn't make sense. There's, you know, it's across town on the outskirts and it's closer to town B instead of town A that's in this one. So as long as it's not splitting up the block group itself, but it portions them out, you can do that and make a comment. And you're welcome to come on as well and clarify if I'm not answering it correctly. But yes, that is the intention of this system.
Yeah, thank you guys for answering the questions. And so I did find after Christy posted the US Census block groups are there. So I'm not talking about your guys' groupings. I understand those, but I understood that you guys wanted feedback on the census blocks and how to group them together, but not larger than a census block group. So some of these census block groups incorporate like, you know, up to 30 census blocks. So if we want to give you comment on 30 census blocks, do we have to fill out the form 30 times?
No, I think, okay, I'm off mute. I think if you want to comment on the whole group, you could click on one census block. Can you do a multiple select?
No.
No, I think it's
No.
just one. So you could just click on one and say, you know, for anyone who's very familiar with census geographies, the first 12 digits of this number is the actual block group. So if you're like, okay, I want to comment on this block group as a whole, you could just put that, you know, paste that into your comments and say, you know, I think this whole block group should be one project area or whatever your comment ends
Got
up
it.
being. So yeah,
Yes,
you don't need
that
to submit it
is
30 times. We'll incorporate that.
that is helpful. A
Yep.
multiple select would be terrific. I don't know if that
Yeah.
can be put in at this point, but
Yeah, I
Play
don't
well
think
with
we
the
can.
surveys. So unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah, there was a very specific reason we only allowed a single select, and you can also use the general comment option rather than the, you know, the select to fill in the survey. That might be a better.
so we
way
can
to
put
do
in
that.
a general comments and then just reference the census blocks or the block group.
Yes.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. I think Maisie had her hand up first.
Yeah, just a quick question. So when I had inquired earlier about the consolidation of the project areas, I think it was stated that the lowest you could go was 2,000 project areas, but in my mapping, I'm seeing that there are 4,058 census block groups in Colorado. So is that 2,000 number because you're not actually using all of the census blocks, because not all census blocks have eligible locations in them?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so
thank you.
not all census block groups have locations. So that, like, you know, a lot
Gotcha.
of this, like this blank area is
Okay.
probably a bunch of groups. So that's why
Yes.
that number is lower.
Okay. All right. That's all I had. Thanks.
All right. And then Trip.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, expanding on Maisie's point from earlier about how I think a lot of people are expending resources now, given the application window is pretty tight. So we have to do some preliminary project modeling. As you were just kind of showing an example of PAM consolidation in that town, I don't know what town it was, but you were talking about not having orphan locations that are within a certain area. Isn't some of that covered by the rescoping process, where if there's, you know, maybe contiguous blocks that don't receive applications, that those could fall under rescoping? And the reason I'm asking is just as you guys consolidate these PAMs, it can dramatically change the economics of a single application, and I'm just wary of that. I'm sure you have that under consideration, but just, you know, hopefully the rescoping will cover some of those peripheral dots that don't get applied for out of the gates.
Yeah, and that's definitely a really important step in the process. So, you know, we know not everything is going to get applied for. So that rescoping is one of our methods for making sure that we can reach every unserved location in Colorado. I think, you know, these are two different methodologies for that same purpose, and one is just pre-application and one is post.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And just as a general comment, I'd just say keep economics in mind as you're consolidating PAMs as well. But thank you very much.
Yep.
And thanks, Brandy. I saw your note in the chat as well.
Hey, Megan, we are actually at time. There's a couple more
Yes.
questions in the chat, so I don't know if you want to go over just slightly, but I think we can maybe do another one of these in a couple days or something. So.
Yeah, we can definitely do another help session. Get that on the calendar for maybe next week sometime. If folks need that or want that, maybe give a thumbs up if you're interested in more time. And then while you're doing that, David asked a question, are applications expected to open in August, or is there an updated window when they'll start and how long they'll be accepted? So David, all of that information is in our draft grant guidelines. So there's a timeline on one of the very first pages. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. And if there are any comments you have on that, that's also open for public comment right now through August 12th. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll end for today and keep an eye on your email for additional information.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Megan. We appreciate it.